Hi there, and welcome to episode 9 of the Knitter Next Door podcast. You're joining me, Angie B, in my home in Mansfield in Nottinghamshire, which is fairly central within the UK. I live here with my husband Richard and my two sons, Aidan and Ezra, who are 13 and 2 respectively. I've got one silly staffy dog that I rescued I think it's about 7 years ago or so now, 8 years maybe, and her name's Layla, or Bernard, depending. And we have two naughty Bengal cats called Lily and Teddy. They sometimes make an appearance, so you may or may not get to see them later on in the show. A huge welcome to anybody who is new to the podcast, and a massive massive welcome back to anyone who is a returning viewer. I did notice that since the Christmas period, my viewership, if that's a word, I don't know, has gone up massively. I've got lots and lots of new subscribers. So hello everybody, it's lovely to have you here. I hope you will enjoy watching this episode. So happy new year everybody. It's been quite a while since I last put out a regular podcast, but I did participate in the Vlogmas, and I know quite a few people have decided to have a look at that, so thank you very much for those of you that decided to watch it. And yeah, thanks so much to everybody who reached out and messaged me, and all the various different sort of kind comments and likes and things that I received. It's so nice to have that interaction with everybody, so much appreciated. I hope everyone's had a restful time over the festive season, whether you celebrate or whether you don't. I hope you've enjoyed the holiday period. So I was watching the latest episode of the Chevy Rell's Stuff podcast, which if you're not already a viewer, please do check that out. She's so funny, such a brilliant mind, and an extremely talented knitter amongst all the other different crafts that she gets up to. It's really well worth a watch. But her most recent episode, she basically introduced the thing whilst wearing all of the knitting, and she put it out there. I've shown you mine, why don't you show me yours? She said, this is something everyone should do. So I'm going to take you up on that, Chevis. Here is everything I knitted in 2018, the roundup. This is going to call for a bit of stripping. Richie B's in the background going, sweet. So, the Booster Beanie, Gudrun Johnson. The Selby Mittens by Skandia. The Caramelised Cowl, Laura Nelkin. The Texture Time Shawl by Stephen West. The Deco Drape Shawl by Stephen West. The Flo's Ache Poncho by Laura Nelkin. Boy Sweater, can't remember who by, tell you later. Flax, Tin Can Knits. Shoe Suey Shrug by Susan Summer. Like a Cloud, Hohi Locatelli. Tenya by Caitlin Hunter. Chuck Sweater by Andy Satterland. White Horse sweater by Andy Satterlund. Not Andy Satterlund, Caitlin Hunter. The Sea Glass by Megan Reagan. Ambient by Eri. Zweig by Caitlin Hunter. The Exposure Top by Julie Dubrow. The Summer Something by Julie Dubrow. Summer Sun. And oh, hello. No, that's two at once. Ah, what a fail. There's a right workout. The Junk Top by Kemperay. And finally, Summer Light by Julie Dubrow. Julie Knits in Paris. Well, that was a bit of a workout. So yeah, I surprised myself. There are actually other things that I knitted as well last year that I just couldn't wear, or like this, and some little toys and bits and pieces and ornaments for my Christmas tree. I toyed with wearing those as earrings, but then I thought, no, you know what, this is enough. This is probably more than enough for everybody. But there we go. Yeah, so it's two giant, massive bags full of stuff, and I just have no idea where the time went or how I possibly managed to fit all that in, because at the moment, this year, I've knit a hat, and we're already on the 7th of January, so yeah. Anyway, yeah, somehow, last year, I managed to fit in all of that lot. So you've had a bit of a sneak peek then there, but I have had several finishes since the last time I saw you. Probably the first one of which then would be this one here, which is the Exposure Top by Julie Knits in Paris, Julie Dubrow. And so this is knitted in Hey J yarns. It was the colourway that was dyed for the Tits Out collective. The light is actually washing this out a little bit. The colours are probably slightly deeper than this in real life. I love the way this is coming out, all sort of like tiger striped and crazy. I did alternate skeins in there, and yeah, it's just a really fun top to wear. When I made it, it's knit in sort of 3 separate panels, sort of one here, and then one on the bottom. And the idea being that when you come to join them together, you can actually decide for yourself how low cut this piece is here. So I think it was supposed to be quite significantly further down, but I just thought for wearability, other than sort of around the swimming pool, I would prefer to have it just that little bit higher up. I think actually now on reflection, I've gone probably a little bit too high, but I don't mind. I do quite like it, and I wore it over Christmas. This year just gone. Okay, so that's probably all I've got to say about that. It was a really fun item to knit. It did take me a little while to get around to finishing it. I think mostly because there was a bit of Kitchener stitch involved, which not a problem at all. But every time I do Kitchener, I have to sit down with my little guide and figure out exactly how to do it again. For some reason, it just doesn't come to me naturally. I have to watch a video or read my little Kitchener guide that I've got. So that was just what was putting me off. And yeah, other shiny things were calling to me at the time. But yes, I got it done fairly shortly after the last podcast, I think. Back maybe in November last year. So that was that one. Okay, so another finished object that I have then is probably fairly obvious. This jumper that I'm wearing right now. So this is the Zweig by Caitlin Hunter. I've knitted this in Townhouse Yarns, their Fade Street 4-ply. So that's a merino and silk blend. It's a single spun yarn, so maybe a bit of a dodgy choice for a sweater, but when I picked it, I was a little bit new. This yarn I picked up at Edinburgh Yarn Festival actually last year in March, and it was very early on in my sort of sweater knitting career, and I didn't quite necessarily understand the implication of single spun yarn as opposed to stuff that's been plied, but basically it makes it far more likely to pill and to you know, show signs of wear and stuff like that if the fibres aren't as tightly twisted as something that's been plied together. But I think if I'm reasonably gentle with it and don't do, you know, silly things like putting all of my other knitting on top of it, then hopefully it should hold up okay. If I'm just a bit gentle with it and look after it. Anyway, so yeah, this it took me quite a long time to knit, and I think mostly because, and I'd have explained this, sorry, in another podcast. It was mostly because what I was doing was trying to alternate the skeins in the body. Because it's a hand-dyed yarn, what I didn't want was there to be like a massive patch of, you know, one colour and then into the next skein and that sort of thing. So I alternated the skeins as I went along. Now I've used for a long time the technique of helical knitting and alternated the skeins to do that. And absolutely fine, I've got on with that perfectly in the past, where I've had a jumper that's been plain stockinette, but with this one the entire body is covered in like this, hopefully you can see that on the camera, this cabled texture pattern. So what that meant was that it kind of interrupted the flow really of the helical knitting, and I wasn't sure quite how to get around that and still keep the helices going on. So anyway, cut a long story short, basically the lady called Jen Arnold Culliford, whose book I've got that talks in depth about helical knitting, brought out a new book at the back end of last year, October time, where she explained in much more detail how to use helical knitting in different ways. The book is called Something New to Learn About Helical Knitting. I did talk about it in a previous podcast. And yeah, so my questions were answered by that, and so yeah, I've been able to carry on and finish knitting this top now, and very successfully, and I'm really pleased with the result. It's very comfortable to wear, and I think it looks great. The colours, unfortunately, the light that I'm using is quite harsh. It's night time at the moment. We're not getting a great deal of decent light in here in the day anyway, so I'm just trying to take advantage of the evening to record while Ezzy's asleep, and it is washing out the colours somewhat. This section in particular, this is in a colour called Cupcake, and it's got loads of really different sort of beautiful speckles in there. There are pinks and greens and all sorts of different things on a background of a pale blue. So in person this is much prettier than I think it's actually reading on my screen, certainly. But if you have a look on my Instagram, which is Angie B _79, you'll hopefully be able to see some better pictures there. If you don't have Instagram, I'm also on Ravelry. I am Angie B, thank you Layla Bean, Angie B 1979 on Ravelry, and I have updated my project page, and the photos on there are in a much better light and do show the colours off a lot better than this is reading on the screen. So other than trying to figure out the helical knitting, there were no issues with this jumper. The pattern is incredibly well written, as with all of the Caitlin Hunter jumpers that I've knitted, and yeah, it was a dream. It really was. I was pretty new to colour work. I've done the booster beanie and the mitts and little ornaments before, but this is the first time I'd done a sweater or something of this scale with colour work in it, but that all worked out quite nicely, so I was very pleased with that. And I think that's probably all I need to tell you about this one. Sorry, just one more thing about this particular sweater. The darker colourway is called Phenomenon, and I didn't make any adjustments to the pattern, so I followed it exactly as it was. And just to say as well that this overall texture I actually found really kept the interest going when knitting this. I've knitted other things with an overall texture on before, and it's kind of ended up slowing me down. But in this particular instance, what I found was the way that it's actually structured in the pattern, the respite that you get between the pattern rows actually kind of makes it fly. I think you find yourself going, oh, I'll just do one more repeat of the pattern, just one more repeat, and before you know it, you kind of got to the end. When I actually sank my teeth into this was, I think, at somewhere around the beginning of December, and then I finished it for Christmas Day. It took me, I think, about 3 weeks or so from here to knit all the rest of the body. It was a lot. It was a lot of work. It did take me a lot of hours, but I felt that it went really, really quickly. From a subjective perspective, it felt like it was just off the needles, that it flew off in no time at all. So another advantage of my having not podcasted in quite a long time is that I've got a ton of finished objects for you. So this is another one that I knitted. I showed it off earlier in my little montage, and this one is called Boy Sweater, or this iteration of it is the Boy Sweater. It's by Frogginet Knitting Patterns, which is a lady called Lisa Chemry. I cannot remember exactly how I constructed this, which is awful to say, isn't it? What I did was I followed along on the Making Things app, so I can't even look at the pattern to tell you, because I'm no longer subscribed to the Making Things app, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later. I'm fairly certain it was top down, because I've sort of got a vague recollection of having knitted this last and sort of playing yarn chicken at the very end here. But yeah, I'm sure it was sort of top down and then sort of cast on a few stitches here and cast off a few there, blah blah blah. But this section was knitted on afterwards. I do remember that much. I had to kind of pick up stitches all the way around here to knit this shawl, waterfall style collar, shawl collar. What am I talking about? Dear me, still I've not had enough sleep. The buttons were from my mum, and they're really, really cute, and the fit is lovely. I think I went up a size because as my little boy, he's big for a 2-year-old. He's tall and he's got quite a big chest measurement for his age, and perfectly healthy. He's just a big one, and takes after his daddy. So there we go. But yeah, it was really, really lovely to knit. It was a lovely, lovely pattern, and I think I was finished with it in around about 4 or 5 days, no more than that. So it was really satisfying as well. It's knit in a double knit yarn. It's by Stylecraft. It's their Stylecraft alpaca tweed. So it was probably, I don't know, about £4 or £5 for a ball, and I think I only used 2 full balls in the entire project. So that was really quite nice. It washes really, really nicely as well. That yarn is an alpaca and acrylic blend, and yeah, it keeps its shape really, really nicely, and I can just chuck it in the washing machine with everything else. There's no wear on it. He's worn this so many times. He absolutely loves it. So yeah, that's the alpaca tweed double knit. I used the colour duck egg, and yeah, 2 skeins is roughly equivalent to 480 metres. I'm just reading all my details off of Ravelry because I can, because I've actually updated it. I spent, oh gosh, around about an hour and a half last night trying to book my ideas up and become less rubbish at Ravelry. So yeah, if you do happen to have a look at my Ravelry now, it will be a relatively, not 100%, but relatively accurate account of the knitting that I've done in the last year or 2, and crochet as well. So another finish that I have for you is this one here. This was my Texture Time shawl. So this was the most recent mystery knit along that was released at the end of last year by Stephen West for the West Knits mystery knit along. So this was released in 4 parts somewhere, was it the beginning of October maybe, and then finished at the end of October, I think it was. So this was the first part, this syncopated brioche piece here, affectionately referred to as the zebra unicorn squid whilst I was knitting it. This section here with the Latvian braids was the second part. I went into quite a bit of detail about this in my last episode, so if you want to sort of hear me talk about any more detail on this, it's all in there. But safe to say, the last time I spoke to you, I was probably about halfway through this section here, which was the 3rd piece of the design that was released. So yeah, I finished all of that, and then I think I'd already done 1/2 and I was halfway through the second bit. I think that's where I was. It took me a month of Sundays to knit this 3rd section, and really this stopped me keeping up with the knit along and kind of knocked the wind out of my sails a little bit, I would say. I think when you can see everyone kind of racing ahead, and I know it's not a competition, I know it's not, but there's something in me that kind of just wants to keep up and wants to at least be able to start the last section with everybody else, not be the first person to finish the whole thing, but to at least kind of stay in time with the pattern as it's released and stuff. But I didn't have a chance, not a chance, of getting this section done on both sides in the week. And I think from the point that I started to fall behind, I was just like, well, I don't care then. And so it took me quite a bit of time to kind of get round to finishing it. The work involved in this was absolutely phenomenal. It's 5 full skeins of fingering yarn, and I tell you what, there's barely anything left of any of the colours now it's finished. So, I mean, that's like 2,000 metres of yarn. That's a lot. Sorry, 2,000 yards. But still, it's a whole lot of knitting. And in sort of 4 weeks, I think, yeah, that's a challenge for anyone. But particularly, you know, when you haven't got that amount of time to invest in it. But there we go. I've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed it. I just could not keep up with the schedule for knitting. The 4th bit, that didn't take me very long. Not really. That was this kitten paws bit here. And then he released it with an optional part 5, which came out, was probably just a couple of days after this one, which was to put the border on it. And so yeah, that was you can do it or you don't have to do it. But I thought the effect was really quite cool, and it helped just to sort of marry in these darker sections on the end with the lighter bit that I'd done in the middle. And I think, you know, however you'd set your colours up, because it's entirely really up to you as to where you chose to place things, you could then use this border just to get it all to marry together at the end. So I was pleased with that. I've not blocked it yet, so it is all still sort of quite wavy and floppy looking, and yeah. Obviously, I haven't woven in all my ends because this is me we're talking about. But also, there are about 800,000 billion of them. So yeah, no, I don't actually see that's going to be a thing. I'll do something with them at some point, but it's not going to be a priority of mine, as you may have noticed. Anyway. What else do I want to say? So this section here, I chose to just switch it up a little bit by putting in these little colour flashes. The yarn is from Ching Fibres. I ordered it via the Stephen and Penelope website at the time when they released the kits, originally at the point in time that the Mystery Knit Along was announced. After this section, I found this bit actually quite enjoyable. I like these, I like the effect here of these like kitten paws and things. I think they're really cool. And this border, it's like a folded over thing that kind of casts itself off whilst you're making it, and that was really, really interesting to do. And it was interesting in terms of creating some of these stitches here. You were knitting into your existing fabric, sort of several rows underneath. For all of the techniques involved in the entire shawl that were anything other than just a straight knit purl variant, Stephen did put quite detailed videos up on YouTube to guide you through, to show you exactly what to do. So although it does look probably really complicated to people if perhaps they're new to knitting, or maybe haven't necessarily been as adventurous in terms of the projects that they've chosen, I don't see that there's anything in here that if you're capable of doing a knit and a purl stitch that you couldn't do. Anybody could do this by just following along with the tutorials that he produced online. You have to keep your wits about you. Certainly it took a lot of concentration to do it, but there's nothing that I would describe as being particularly difficult. More perhaps fiddly and requiring concentration is how I would describe it. Would I do this kind of mystery knit along again? I think for me personally the answer would be no. I think in future definitely I would be inclined to wait and see what the finished article looks like, have a look at different people's colour placements and things like that. It's very difficult to know if your choice is going to be right at the very beginning when you're only knitting one small section of it, and how that's then going to impact the overall appearance later on down the line, and whether perhaps you're going to be kicking yourself thinking, oh, I wish I'd changed the colours around. So I think in future I would rather wait and A, see the design and whether I like it, and B, if I do, where maybe the colour placement would be, just from getting inspiration from other people who are better, I feel, at choosing colour placement than I am. But actually I think in terms of with this one I've been really, really lucky, and I love it to bits. I really do think it's gorgeous. A whole heck of a lot of work, but worth it. Yeah, and it's lovely to wear, and it's so warm and squishy, and there's different ways that you can have it on as well. And yeah, it's so nice to sort of curl up under. It's kind of like having a little blanket, little slanket to wear and keep warm with whilst I'm doing my knitting and whilst I'm watching telly of an evening. So yeah, that's my texture time, and I'm very, very pleased with it. The fibres are Suri alpaca mixed with merino wool, and that's this one here. I think it's something like Warm Peach, that one's called, by Ching Fibres. It knits up to a 4-ply, and it kind of gives you the effect of like a mohair without it being mohair. So it's got that fluffiness, that halo, but it doesn't seem to fly away. It doesn't seem to have that getting up your nose effect that mohair can have. So I think I tend to prefer this to the mohair. Or no issue with mohair. I've knitted stuff in it and I wear it perfectly happily, but I do tend to find it just kind of irritates me a little bit even still. But this doesn't, not at all. So I think if you were interested in perhaps some sort of mohairified project, but didn't really get on with the mohair, this could be a nice substitute. But just beware, this is 4-ply, where a lot of the mohairs are a lace weight, so not necessarily the sort of thing you would want to hold together with something. I don't know. Anyway, just something you could look at. The rest of it is the Blueface Leicester High Twist sock yarn, I believe. All of the details I'll put in the description bar below, so you can look at that. I'll link to my project page as well on Ravelry, so you can see the precise details. But yeah, this is just a standard 4-ply yarn. Look there, I've not even put that on. You know what, I've only just seen that. That's really rubbish. I'm so sorry. Call yourself a knitter. I'm so sorry about the lighting. Anyway, so this is another finished object that I have here. This is these are, what's wrong with me today? I can't say plurals. These are the Rose City Rollers Littles or Minis. Let's have a look. Okay, so I've not written it down. Good. Anyway, Rose City Rollers something. Littles, Minis, one of those. I'll put it on screen, shall I? Look it up. But this is a free pattern, and I wouldn't have known anything about it except for Tommy Trujillo on Squirrel Pie Productions. She mentioned these. She was knitting some for her little baby girl, and I thought, that looks really cool, and it's free, and I've got some yarn kicking around, so I made these, and they are absolutely beautiful. Again, this was something that was done within maybe like 2 days or something it took to make these. So it's really nice to just have a little project that you can cast off within a couple of days, and you've got something to show for it, and something that's actually sort of relatively substantial. I mean, this is footwear. Ezzy calls them Mummy's wool feet, which I just think is the cutest little thing on earth. He's like, oh, where's Mummy's wool feet? He knows the word socks. It's not that he can't say socks, but he knows these are wool, and so he calls them Mummy's wool feet. So there you go, Mummy's wool feet. But they're they've got like a little tiny heel flap and gusset construction there. And yeah, I'm sure they were top down and then just closed the toe with a little bit of Kitchener on the end. But again, don't really remember too well. Been to sleep several times since then. Very, very sorry. But yeah, I've knitted these in some Regia that I had. I don't even think I bought it. I think this is some yarn that my mum gave me, but it's been in my stash a very, very long time. And it's this one here. It's their, I'm not going to try and pronounce this, but I believe it's basically saying 4-ply in probably German, and it's a mosaic colour that it produces. In the ball it looks like a rainbow, and then when it comes out it's probably sort of more greeny orangey than anything else, but I think it's beautiful. Really, really beautiful effect that's come up with, and that's actually reading pretty accurately on the screen right now. So that was those. Really, really quick knit, really, really simple pattern, and free, and yeah, wonderful. Definitely recommend it if you want to knit some little socks. This pattern is available in the adult version as well, so you know, it's not just for kiddie socks. You can knit these for yourself too. So yeah, definitely highly, highly recommend that pattern. And this yarn is awesome, really, really awesome. So if you can get hold of some of that as well, if you've not tried it, which probably most people have, but if you haven't, it's I would recommend that. Lovely. So some more socks that I made for Ezra are these ones here. This was a pattern that I found on the Making Things app again, and this one is called Winter Weekend Socks. I was looking for something that would use a heavier weight. I think these are something like a sport to double knit, possibly more double knit weight. But yeah, so this is a pattern called Winter Weekend by Shannon Squire. Just looking down at my notes there. Yes, I've actually made notes. You wouldn't believe it by listening to me rambling on, but that notes do exist. So yeah, again, it's a heel flap and gusset construction. It's knitted from the this bit. What is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? What do you call this? Cuff down. And then closed at the toe again. I struggled with this. I have no idea why. I think probably because I got a bit cocky, because they knit up literally in like 2 hours or something like that. Maybe a little bit slower. Maybe 3 or 4. I don't know. It's no more than an afternoon's work though to knit the pair, because it's a heavier weight yarn. And I think because of that, I got a bit cocky, and I ended up having to knit them like 3 times to get this pair, because I kept stopping too short, and then they didn't fit him. And then I don't know, I thought I was measuring it, and each time I measured it, put him on him, I stopped it where it said to stop, and then carried on, did the toe and closed it, and they were too short. So I did them again and did the same thing again, and this time like made them longer and looked at Amani's feet properly, and they were still too short, and so I made a third pair and they're still a bit too short. And yeah, so I'm just need to block them bigger, but it's bugging me and I didn't want to knit them like for a fourth time. So yeah, these were a bit of a fail, but just on account of my own ineptitude and nothing else. So yeah, I just got lulled into the false sense of security of knitting double knit socks. I have to say I'm not as keen on the appearance of them, just in terms of the weight of the yarn. I just think in the fingering weight yarn, the 4-ply yarn, the effect of the fabric is nicer to my eye. They're nice, they're perfectly okay. I like the colours and everything else like that, and the yarn is very, very nice, but for socks I'm just not as keen on the overall effect. So I don't think I would be tempted to knit thicker socks again unless it was for I don't know. I can't actually finish my sentence. I don't know what I was going to say, but yeah, not for me. Okay. So another finished object that I have that I'd forgotten about actually is a hat that I knitted for Rich. He has moaned and moaned and moaned at me to knit him a hat for ages, because the one that he had was kind of worn out and he'd had it for years and years, and he's been looking at all my knitters stuff and going, you know, it really wouldn't take you long to knit a hat, would it? And you know, you've got plenty of yarn and blah blah blah. So at the end of last year I entered a giveaway on the Yarn Equals Joy podcast, which it's a relatively new podcast. She's only been doing it for probably a few, maybe a couple of months now. Yeah, so she held a giveaway and I was the lucky winner. And as part of the stuff that she sent to me, which was amazing and overwhelming and generous, and there was all sorts of little pieces that she included in there for other members of my family, which I just thought was so lovely of her and completely unnecessary, but I'm extremely grateful for. She included a skein of Peace Fleece in the Grassroots colourway, so I turned it into this hat. Literally the second that Richard saw this fleece coming out of the box, he was just like, that is mine, I want that. And in the note that Rachel had included with the package, she said, I couldn't send you you know, all these sort of feminine skeins without sending something a little bit more masculine as well, knowing that most of your household is male. Yeah, she sent me this skein as well, and yeah, as soon as Rich saw it, he was completely in love with it. So we went on Rav and did a search for free hat patterns, and this is the one that he liked, and it was beautiful. I knit this in I cast it on about 11 o'clock one night and it was finished before midnight the following day. So yeah, it flew, absolutely flew. I didn't get much of anything else done that day, and it was while Rich was off on holiday, so I was able to just kind of sit and knit and knit and knit and knit and knit and not have to worry about making tea and changing bums and things. But yeah, out of the deal he got his hat, so he was like, no, you keep knitting, that's fine. So yeah, I had sore hands. The crown decreases on this are absolutely stunning, I think. Look at that. It's like a flower. I think it's amazing. Absolutely beautiful. The yarn, I can certainly see what Kristen means. So that's Kristen of the Vullenvine podcast and Hand Dyed Yarn Company. She was knitting for her husband Dennis a pattern by Jared Flood. It was a big sweater. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think she was using this type of yarn, and yeah, I was grateful when I'd finished this. It feels really, really nice to wear, but to actually knit with, it's hard. It's hard on your hands, and I was sort of, I think probably because I've spent an intensely long period of time in one sitting knitting as well, that compounded the effect. But yeah, this is crunchy. It's crunchy to knit with. Over time, and it even says on the ball band, this kind of softens up with wear and with washing and stuff as well. So you know, it's already lovely to feel, and it's not itchy. It's just nice, and it's warm, and it's snug, and it's sheepy, and it smells amazing, and the colour is gorgeous, and it's only going to get better and nicer and softer and more lovely as time goes by. It's far, far, far too big for me, so I'll just wear it like that for you, because that's beautiful, isn't it? Or shall we just pull it down a little bit? Yeah. I can't wear this hat, it's too big for me, but it looks amazing on Rich. What I'll do is I'll pop a picture in for you so that you can see Rich wearing his hat. But back to what I was saying about Vullenvine. Yeah, she gave up on knitting that sweater for her husband on account of, I think she was just finding this particular yarn that little bit too harsh on her hands, and I can see, yeah, I perfectly happy to knit a hat with it, but I don't think I'd want to knit an entire sweater out of this. I think I'd like to wear an entire sweater knit out of this because it's gorgeous, but I wouldn't want to have to be the person that knitted it. So there we go. Preferences, I guess, you know, everybody's different. That's just, you know, my experience with this particular yarn. 100% I would recommend this pattern, and it's completely free as well, and I think, you know, it's open to interpretation as well. You know, you could easily change this this ribbon to be 2x2 if you didn't like 1x1 ribbon. I mentioned in one of my Vlogmas videos actually about adjusting the technique on a 1x1 rib to make it less floppy and a little bit more uniform, and I've employed that technique when I did this as well, and I'm really happy with it. In the Vlogmas episode I'm thinking of, and I can't remember which episode it was, so if you're really interested you could go back and take a look, but you might end up having to go through loads of videos and I'm sorry. But basically you would, as you knit in a 1x1 rib in the round, as you come to the purl columns, you would wrap the yarn around the needle in a different way in order to just make that purl column tighter, and it helps just to neaten the whole thing up. So yeah, I put a little tutorial in. I might try and find which one it was and just pop it in the description bar if you're interested in hearing a little bit more about that and seeing a demonstration. Yeah, I'll pop a link to it in the description bar. The crown decreases and the patterning, it's all very, very specific of exactly where you put the decreases, how you form the decreases, and how you get therefore this beautiful shape. So that I really appreciated. As I say, I just think for a free pattern, for a worsted weight of yarn, you really can't go wrong. These cables here as well are really, really well thought out and really, really nice to execute. They're done over several rows to get that sort of gradual shift along there. It's not just one twist. So yeah, really clever. Really, really enjoyed knitting this. And Rich wears it every single day and loves it. So moving into works in progress then. I had a little time to make a Christmas Eve cast on, and by a little time I mean a little time. I think it was about 3 minutes to midnight or something like that on Christmas Eve that I cast this on. But this is the Northeasterly blanket that's just been released in December, and this is kind of a new scrappy blanket. It's by Skein-Anigans, and again I will link to all the details. At the time that I downloaded this it was free. I do believe it's now a paid pattern though, but I love it. I just think it's another answer to kind of like the scrappy blanket, what to do with your single skeins and odds and ends and things, but just, you know, a different idea to having these mitered squares. I love my mitered squares, but it's nice just to have a couple of different things to work on. So yeah, that's the Northeasterly. Pretty simple construction, but very, very clever in how these columns work. What you basically do, if you've not seen this pattern, is you work it in columns like this, and you just keep going and you change your yarn at random really. It doesn't have to be a set size. You can make it all very uniform if you want to, and you know, count the rows and things and do them all precisely the same, or you could just keep going and knit that as long as you want it to be, and then change to another colour and do 2 rows, or however you want it to look. And then what you're going to do is add extra panels on at the side, and then another one and another one and another one, columns should I say. And I believe she's also now brought out another pattern where it's the same sort of effect, but where you can put texture stitches in here as well. So there's lots of different options for this blanket. I think it's just a really interesting take on the kind of modular, constructed, scrappy blanket, and I'm really pleased with it. So that's my Christmas cast on. The yarn, you will, if you happen to go back and have a look at my Vlogmas series, you'll see that I had a yarn advent calendar from Sweet Skein and Mine, which is a lady called Amanda, who is out in Fredericton in New Brunswick in Canada. And so this was the Christmas Eve skein, mini skein that came out of my yarn advent calendar. And this one was called, I think it's Light the Tree, but I will check that and pop the details for you. But yeah, really, really beautifully speckled yarn. So that's that. So more on that in future episodes, no doubt. That was my little Christmas Eve cast on. There's my little ball of yarn. Another work in progress that I have at the moment are my vintage Fairy Lights socks by Helen Stewart. So that's Curious Handmade. This is the first pattern of Helen's that I've followed, and I have to say it's amazing. She has broken down this entire pattern row by row by row, even through sections where it's purely kind of like just stockinette and you're not really doing anything different to the last row. You've got like a chart that you can fill in and tick off and show exactly where you are right the way through the pattern, and I think that is just so helpful. But anyway, that's by the by. So this is the Vintage Fairy Lights pattern. Probably a lot of people will be aware of this. I've not, with the exception of those few socks that I've done recently, the recent flurry, shall we say, I've not actually knitted many socks in the past. It's not something I've been particularly that interested in knitting, to be honest, but these really, really appealed to me. And I'm using the full skein of yarn that came in, again, my advent calendar from Sweet Skein and Mine. This colourway is called the Winter Wonderland. And yeah, I just thought this would be perfect for those socks. So that's how that's coming out. Colours reading relatively true. This is kind of a silvery grey background here with speckles of, there are purples, neon pinks, greys, odd bit of cherry in there, and some browns and greens and all different sorts. But overall, it kind of it's grey and pink is the impression that you would get from a distance. Maybe purple. But yeah, I love them. I really love them, and I think the pattern is so clever and so well written. It's a heel flap and gusset construction. I know from watching other podcasts and things that people seem to, you know, go through lots of different iterations of different constructions before they find, you know, perhaps their Cinderella sock or their perfect fit. But for me, this one is seeming to fit quite nicely. This particular version of it, anyway. So yeah, I'm very, very pleased with them. I am, again, the pattern tells you the percentage that you've got completed as you're going along, so that's really kind of quite nice as well, because you can see, oh, in, I don't know, 4 rows time I'll be 60% complete, and that kind of thing. I think it gives you that extra bit of momentum and that extra nudge just to keep going, because you can see you know, exactly how far through the project you are. So yeah, I'm looking forward to finishing these. I've slowed down a little bit. This first section went really, really quickly, going through this patterning bit. And yeah, down to this bit here was quick. When I got to the heel flap, I still did 2 at a time, so I went across here, then across here, and then back across there and back across, and constructed this flap 2 at a time. And then it's just been bringing the gusset in. That bit, for whatever reason, has been taking me a very, very long time. as I've come to the decreases to bring this section in here, for some reason I just kept forgetting one here or there, so I've had to keep going back and counting and looking at it and trying to figure out where I was, and I've been forgetting to mark it off on my pattern. So although the pattern is incredibly cleverly written and gives you every single facility that you could possibly be given to stay on track with where you are, this one here still manages to mess it up occasionally in terms of the decreases. So that's just required a bit more concentration from me. Having decided to knit them 2 at a time, in my infinite wisdom, I decided it'd be a really, really good idea to knit from the outside and the inside of the skein at the same time. I don't know for the life of me what I was thinking. I think I've even remarked before about knitting from the inside of a cake of yarn. When I've tried to do it in the past, the whole thing just kind of collapses in on itself. It's all right for a bit, and then eventually it just, as you start to take more and more yarn out of the centre, the whole thing starts to collapse and lose its structural integrity, at which point the yarn can start to tangle on itself and cause problems. So yeah, that happened really, really, really quickly. Something about this yarn, it seems to sort of catch on itself. So this is my magical solution, and it's actually working really, really well. I pulled the most recent huge yarn bath out of the centre here and just shoved it on the other end of this, what is essentially a kitchen roll in a tube. And so yeah, I'm working from this. This is the kind of the inside, and this, where are we? This is the outside. And then I can just kind of, as these twist up on themselves, I can just turn that around, no problem at all, or I can twist these, and it just gives me full access to the whole of this skein. But it looks awful, but I don't care because it works. Rich was really, really taking the mick out of me the other day because I was there with this thing. And he says, do you know what? He says, you know what I love the most about knitting is that, you just have all these beautiful tools and accoutrements that are available to you for, things like holding your yarn. And he's looking at me, he says, because you've got yours on a bog roll. It's not a bog roll, thank you, Richie B. And my mum, she just got hers on the floor. She not even got it in a project bag. So there's me. Yeah, anyway, whatever. That's my latest knitting tool. The good thing about it, the good thing is I can fold it up and poke it through, but then I can kind of shove my hands in and flip it out, and it holds the yarn on there nicely. So actually, it's really, really good. Everyone, get yourself a bog roll inner or a kitchen roll inner tube. Whatever, it works. Whatever works, hey? So then, the Making Things app, that's another thing that I wanted to talk to you about. I mentioned it at the end of the last podcast, and I've since given it a try. And I subscribed to it for 2 months, so I subscribed probably 2 or 3 days after it first came out, and I cancelled it mid-December, so my subscription has since lapsed, and I've now run out of access to the platform. I thought the amount of designers on there was great. The all the different patterns that were available to you. You have a plethora of choice of all sorts of things on there, so certainly no shortage of beautiful, beautiful patterns from which to choose. For me, I found it a bit stressful in terms of I'd paid my subscription money and I wanted to get value for money, but I'd also got loads of other things that I was already knitting that I'd already bought patterns for, and to then sort of find the time to knit stuff because you've paid, and so I was finding like things that wouldn't take me very long so that I could knit more than one thing, and for me it really stressed me out, just trying to make it feel like I was getting my value for money. And I thought, well, I can't knit that because that's going to take me more than 1 month to make it, and then I won't have time to make something else. And I just ended up going in big circles with it. I don't know, I think the issue is more with me than with the actual platform itself. But yeah, it's in its current format, I would say the Making Things app is not for me. But yeah, I think if you're interested in it, certainly I do like the idea that you can just kind of sign up and do it and then just cancel it at any time as well. You know, it's not like you're being locked into a subscription for a very specific period of time. So I think maybe if you had your eye on lots of little things that perhaps you could get knitted in a short space of time and perhaps didn't want to have to buy all those patterns, then it would be ideal for that. The tools available for following the patterns are cool. I struggled a little bit with them, but I think again it just came down to me and my ineptitude rather than anything that was wrong with the platform itself. I think, yeah, I wouldn't rule out that I might subscribe again at some point in the future if I find enough things on there that I wanted to make and thought I could make them within a short enough period of time that I didn't have to pay, say, over the odds for those patterns. But now there's something for me comforting about buying a pattern and then owning it and being able to go back to it and look at it as a reference in, you know, a passage of time hence, without then having to pay, you know, a further fee. So I'm kind of a little bit on the fence with making things up at the moment. I love, in fact, the fact that they've come into the marketplace and that they have shook things up a little bit and they have created a dialogue and that they have, you know, afforded a conversation around, you know, is Ravelry, does it need a little bit of updating, you know, and Ravelry have now got themselves on Instagram and stuff like that. I think that aspect of it is great, and I think, you know, anything that can kind of afford a move forward is a good thing. But yeah, at this point in time it's not for me, but absolutely in the future I would consider subscribing again. So that's where I am with that. Take a look at it, see what you think yourself. So, I've done a little bit of spinning. So for anyone who's not interested in spinning, this next section is just going to be about my hand spun that I've created. I've been doing a few bits and pieces along those lines recently. So I'm very, very new to spinning. And when I went to the Atlantic Knitscape retreat in September of last year, I'd never even once tried to spin on a spinning wheel, and a very, very kind lady there called Dervla happened to have brought her Ashford Joy with her. I was looking at spinning at that point in time going, I'd like to give it a try, and considering getting a wheel and stuff, but I'd never tried it out. So I made that while I was there under Dervla's instruction with some fluff that she had going spare, and then, yeah, very, very quickly after that decided to dive in and buy my own wheel. This was pretty much the first spin I did on my wheel, or one of. I think there was some fluff that came with it that I spun and made a big hash of, but this was the first time I sat down with some fibre properly and had a good try. And I showed this last time on the podcast. This is it's a custom blend that I bought from Spin Jones, which is a Welsh lady that I found on Etsy. And then from there I spun the rest of that fibre, and I think it came out a lot more evenly. Don't ask me what drafting technique I was using. I think it just kind of changed as I went through the top that I was spinning. I was just trying out all different sorts of things. I've decided to keep it as a single. I think roughly when I weighed it and looked at the yardage that I'd got, it kind of worked out at something approaching the sort of sport weight, this single. So that's that. Since then I have had a go at trying to do some thinner singles and then to ply them together. So that's this spin here. So I've created a 2-ply yarn here, which again in its plied state now is roughly equivalent to a sport weight. I tried to go with a woolen drafting technique for this, so it was like a long backwards draw that I was using mostly. I'm kind of still trying to find what I'm comfortable with and trying out different things, but for this one I think most of it I was kind of going backwards and then letting it all feed on and then backwards. This was bought from a company called Shunkley's, which I believe are fairly local to me. I think they're either Sheffield or Doncaster, somewhere that way, which is north of where I live in the UK, but not far away. It was an Etsy shop again, and these were just some Rolags. It's a merino blend, and in the colourway Frozen. And yeah, I was pretty pleased with what I did, up to the point that I tried to ply them together, and then I think I did it a bit sloppily, and I think it's probably a little bit too loose and maybe a bit over plied in other places. But again, I'm giving myself a break, or at least I'm really trying to, because you know, this was the first time I'd ever tried to ply two singles together. I had no idea what I was doing, other than that you just spin the opposite way from bobbins and stuff. But the Ashford Joy has an onboard lazy Kate. So a lazy Kate is something that actually holds your completed bobbins of yarn, and then you pull from those and spin onto another bobbin. So you could have as many plies as you wanted, and then just spin those all together and onto another bobbin, and the lazy Kate is what holds them. Now you can have something that just sits and you place it behind you or wherever you want it to be, or on my particular spinning wheel there's an onboard section, whereas these two little prongs sit up from the bottom of the wheel and you draw from there. And I think that in and of itself, the action of sort of having to pull forwards and out and then trying to load that on, kind of creates its own difficulty. But whatever, I think I did all right. But yeah, it's, if anything, it's just probably a little bit sloppy, a little bit underplied. But from what I've seen, I think that I can, now I've washed it and done, I can have another go at just feeding this on and adding a little bit more twisting. I don't think it's beyond recovery. But I think, yeah, that's a project for another time. Again, I've nothing specific in mind for what to do with this. I'm just spinning at the minute. I'm just kind of trying to become familiar with my wheel and what it can do. I did try spinning an art bat. I'm not sure what would be considered the success or failure of this. To me, I think, yeah, it's another creature skein, isn't it? That's what I've got there. It's definitely art yarn, but it's not necessarily what I had in mind when I started spinning it. I had this most beautiful bat of fibre from Spin City that I bought at Yarndale, and I don't know whether I've just, you know, again, created it into something that could eat my children in the night, like I did at Atlantic Knitscape, or whether this could, like, you know, get away with being classified as art yarn. I don't know, on the fence on that one. But I love the fact that it's something else that I've tried and that I've done, and that I made this, you know, whatever. It's cool. I'm improving, definitely. I can see, certainly in this one, the progress that I've made, and it you know, it got me able to try out different techniques and different things. For Christmas, Richie B got me a blending board, and I've also got a drum carder as well, so I'm going to be able to really begin to play with blending fibre and making my own Rolags and my own bats and stuff like that, and spinning from those. I've got you know, my eyes on all sorts of different things in that respect. And my mother-in-law, she was able to get hold of a load of fleece for me. She took a trip up to the northern reaches of Scotland a couple of months ago with some friends, and while she was up there, she purchased some fleece for me, and she's had it scoured and washed and carded and prepared nicely for me to be able to sort of, you know, have that as fibre as well. So I've got a lot of playing that I can do. So that's wonderful. This fleece is from a sheep called a Soe sheep. I believe, from the reading that I've done, that it's a heritage breed. It's an ancient kind of hairy sheep. Somewhere I read that someone was saying, you know, it's actually quite a tricky one to get hold of. and it's got two different types of coat on it. It's got kind of like this really hairy bit and then quite a fluffy bit. So I've got two different types of fleece from this thing, but I've got an absolute ton of it. So yeah, certainly I've got enough to have a good practice and a good play. So that was that. What I'm going to do, I'm going to get some of the rollags that I've made, and one of my most recent spins. I put a picture of this on Instagram. So I set up the blending board at the weekend for the first time since I got it, and just had a little play with some fibres that I bought at Yarndale and made some rollags, and I've begun to spin those. So I'm just going to get those to show you. So a blending board is a big square carding piece of equipment. So that's a way of taking fibres and blending them together, essentially, is what it sounds like. So it's like a giant cat brush. You know those metal brushes that you get to brush cats' hair with, and that they go all like when you do. It's like one of those, but it's like this big, and you can put it on your lap, and you can just like then brush fibre on there, and whether that's fleece or whether that's, you know, any number of different things. You could even use cat hair if you wanted to, and you then gradually fill up the board. Then when you're finished, you can just kind of take off that fluff and have a bat, or you can roll it up and make what are called rollags, and they look like this. So it would come off the board in this sort of form. You use two dowels essentially to take the fluff off at the bottom, and you just sort of twist them up and draft the fibres and pull back and twist and pull back again. There's loads of videos on YouTube if you're interested in that process. You can take a look. But this was the first batch of rollags that I made using just it was a company at Yarndale called Wessex Woolcraft, and the lady said, you know, I do a pick and mix. She says, grab yourself a bag, there's all your colours, just go and help yourself, just pull off whatever you want, stick it all in the bag, make sure you take them all from X, Y and Z box, and then come to me and we'll weigh it and you'll pay whatever, because they're all the same amount of money per 100 grams sort of thing. So I think, I don't know, I loaded about 250, 300 grams or so into this bag. Cost me about, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 quid or something like that, and I've got just little fluffy bits of all different colours. So I've used that and just blended them together. It's so nice to play with fibre and make these things, you know, they're really cool. I like those just like that. They're just, I think, just in and of themselves, whoops, they're now on the floor, but they're pieces of art, and I don't know, something really satisfying about them. They don't take long to make, and you know, my little boy can get involved in this as well, and yeah, it's just interesting. It's just something different to do. I decided to make some rainbow ones, and again, I've put pictures of these on Instagram because possibly the colours are a little bit dodgy in this light compared to how they actually look. But yeah, little rainbows. And it's not hard to make them, and then I can just spin from that however I want, and I don't know, it's so exciting just to have a new hobby and something else to do, because I don't have enough hobbies. Anyway, there we go, that's those. So I'll go and fetch the sample that I've been spinning, and that is how it's spinning up. So it's really, really beautiful. Really, really beautiful. So I can't begin to express how satisfying it is to take some fluff of random colours, shove it on a cat comb, a giant cat comb, smush it all together, get a couple of pieces of dowel and flump it up, and then shove it on a spit. It's weird. It's like some kind of sorcery. I feel like some sort of magical wizard. Like, I don't know, the yarn troll or something, I don't know. It's definitely got that sort of fairy tale aspect to it. But yeah, I can't wait to do something with this and to actually knit it up into something. I really would like to start having more of a a purpose in mind. I think, until now, my spinning, it's all been more about, just customizing myself, acclimatizing myself to the actual process itself. But I've started to get a bit more even and a bit better at what I'm doing, and I'm kind of just getting a feel for it. I still don't know what I'm doing, but I feel like I can feel the twist now behind my fingers in the yarn, and when it's enough, and when I can let go, and when I can feed it onto the bobbin, and stuff like that before was alien to me, and I heard people using the terminology but didn't necessarily know what it meant. I think now I've got more into it, I kind of understand what people are talking about more. I think there is definitely a kinesthetic element to learning for a lot of things. I think, when something's an abstract concept, people can say the words and explain things as much as they like, but until you're actually physically doing it, that last little element of understanding is not there. And I think this, for me, has been the missing link, has been actually physically doing it, getting on with it, and just keep persevering and practicing. And now I'm starting gradually to understand what it's all about, and I love it. I love it to bits. So pleased I decided to do this. So a little bit of stash enhancement then, I guess. Couple of things. My mum bought me this beautiful bag for Christmas, and this is another one of the Cottage number 9 bags that she knows are my absolute favourite, and are a firm favourite with my mum as well. So there's the label, look, my Cottage number 9. This is a lady called Terry. These are, I think, without a doubt, the best project bags I have ever encountered. You pull these straps here like this, which closes the top, but then these wraparound sections form a new handle that you can just take along with. So these bags are just so portable, they're so sturdy, they just stand up on their own. The fabric is the thickest, most beautiful quality. They're all fully lined, they have pockets in there. Grace, you were asking in your most recent podcast what crap is inside your bags. Well, in mine I have a random needlepoint protector, which I don't even use them, so why that's in there I've no idea. I have a strange macrame bracelet that I made when I was about 7. No idea. I have a worry stone. I take measure. This was another present my mum got me for Christmas, but this is for doing Portuguese knitting, as you do. And then a little tub of stitch markers. So that's what's inside my project bag. Put it to you. What's the weirdest thing that you've found at the bottom of a project bag? I think for me, probably mine would have to be random old macrame bracelet that I made when I was 7 that has no business being in there. And there's a few crumbs. I already had that one. I got that at Atlantic Knitscape, and I wanted another one, so this one particularly caught my eye with the beautiful bird on it. So I had one of these as well, and yeah, gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. My mum bought me these for Christmas as well. Look, I've got a cup of tea. This is Chapel View Crafts. She's quite prolific on Instagram, and she has a very successful Etsy shop making stitch markers and things. And then there's a little slice of lemon cake. Chapel View Crafts. Again, I'll put links to anything I talk about, and that goes for any of my podcasts and most of my Vlogmas as well. Anything that's in there, I will generally put quite detailed show notes and links in the description bar anyway. So if ever you see something and you're not sure, you want more information, you can ask me if you like, no problem at all, or you can just check the description bar, whichever you find easier. Do get in touch. This is just to anybody. If you want to have a chat, if you want to say hi, you want to tell me what you're working on, if you want to ask me about something, if you just want to shoot the breeze, contact me. I am here, and I would love to speak to anybody out there who enjoys watching the podcast. You know, it's what I do this for. It's the community. It's the back and forth. And I've met so many lovely people so far since I've been doing this, and I'm so grateful for those of you who have reached out to me and, you know, passed a comment or had conversations with me or I've become friends with. It's so lovely, and you know, I would encourage that. If you want to have a chat, do so. I'm here, and I'll gladly have a chat to you as well. Which leads me on to something else that I wanted to talk about, and that was possibly including a segment in future podcasts that was based around you. Because I feel like somewhere along the lines we're all the knitter next door to somebody. So yeah, I'm the knitter next door, but so are you. If you're a knitter, even if you live in the middle of nowhere, you're still next door to someone somewhere. And I'm really interested. Who are you? What are you doing? What are you working on? What are you excited about? What are your plans? And, you know, I'm going backwards and forwards in my mind really about little ideas and how that might look. But I wondered if anybody wanted to, say, record, I don't know, a couple of minutes of themselves saying, this is who I am, I'm the knitter next door, and I'm working on bleh. And then just show me something that you've made. And I could then, if you want me to, pop that into the podcast, and we can all kind of start to get to know who we are, and maybe we could have a knitter next door of the week or whatever. I don't know what that looks like, but if that's something that you fancy, do so. Just, you know, get in touch, and we can have a chat about what that might look like. But I think that could be quite a cool idea. Or, you know, you might not want a video. It might just be you might want to write something down and send me a photo. But if you send me stuff, I can include it in the podcast, and then we can all kind of start to get to know each other. I think further on down the line, I would like to have a Ravelry group and, you know, maybe start a little community of knitters next door. We can all, you know, begin to start and have a conversation properly. I would also like to possibly start some kind of make along, or a something along. There's so many different knit alongs and mystery knit alongs and make alongs and crochet alongs and things along going on. And I don't know whether maybe it's unnecessary, but it's just, again, it's something that possibly I'm missing that I could be doing, and that maybe people want to be involved in and would fancy doing a something along. Or maybe you've got enough to do already. I don't know. Again, let me know if you have any ideas for something that we could do, or something that you would like me to be doing to just engender just a little bit more of a sense of community for people who decide to come back and join me and be part of the Knitter Next Door podcast. But community, that's what it would be about for me. Friendship. And I think that we could kind of start to build something. People who are of the same mind. Right then, so that's it from me. Hopefully next time I won't keep you waiting anything like the amount of time that I have this time. It's been really, really busy, I have to say. The last podcast I made, I was really quite poorly. I was coming down with a cold, and after that I was ill for a couple of weeks, and then Ezra was ill, and it's kind of gone round the house. And then, you know, before you know it, it's the run up to Christmas. I was then doing Vlogmas, and there was no way I could have kept up with Vlogmas and done the podcast, and I was really enjoying doing Vlogmas, so I just decided that this could wait for the new year. It's given me time to do a bit of reflection as well, and just sort of start to think about a few new ideas. So thank you very, very much for your time. Thank you very much for coming back and watching me. Thank you to anyone who's new, as I said at the start. I hope you've enjoyed the episode, and if you've liked it, please do hit the like button and subscribe and share me, and get in touch and comment away and chat to me on Instagram or on Ravelry or wherever. I love to hear from people. So you take care and happy knitting. I'll see you again soon.
It's Christmas Day. We find the knitter next door winding her bobbin twine. She's been doing this now for 23 hours and still managed to serve a right good goose dinner. Hearty goose dinner. E.T. phone home. Elliot. Where's the speak and spell?